Right, getting started in portrait photography can seem quite daunting. It's a lot of things to take into account. I think a lot of people get weighed down in thinking about the gear that they need, which isn't really a big deal, but we're going to talk about that as well. But really, the purpose of this video is to just get you started, get something going, get some work out. So the first thing and the most common question I get asked is, what equipment do I need in order to do it? And realistically, you don't need that much, because when I started with a Canon 40D with a 50mm 1.8. So that's a Canon crop sensor camera. It doesn't really matter if you use micro four thirds, crop sensor, or whatever full frame camera that you have. It really doesn't matter. My advice to you would be to just put a 50mm 1.8 on either a crop sensor or a full frame camera, or something that's an equivalent if you've got a different size sensor camera. If we can show people a large bag full of equipment with big expensive lenses, that they're going to be really impressed. And the reality is that people just don't really care that much. They're not really interested in what camera gear that you're using. They're more interested in themselves, just as always people are. They're interested in how they look, how they feel. And we as photographers feel exactly the same. So we sort of feel that our camera that we're using is our projection of ourselves to the world. And that's simply not the case, because everybody else is thinking about what they're doing. So your model's thinking, does my face look okay? Does my hair look all right? Are these clothes okay? Have I got the right clothes? And so on. They're thinking about stuff like that. So realistically, a simple prime lens, or a basic zoom lens, is going to do the job as well. You just don't need more than that in terms of equipment of the camera body and lens. One camera, one lens, and you're good to go. And you should find the confidence in yourself, not in your camera gear. You're not trying to project your image of who you are to the world with the camera gear that you own. That's just ridiculous. And you always have to remember, most of the really sort of iconic work that's been shot has been shot on lesser camera gear, probably, than what you own. That's just a fact. Now, I know when you look around at other photographers, you'll be thinking, oh, they've got all this fancy camera gear, they've got expensive cameras and so on. Yes, and that's true that they do, but it doesn't mean they started out like that. I started out with 40D with 50mm, and I'd focused on trying to get my lighting right. Then we need to talk a little bit about lighting. And I really strongly suggest that if you're going to use flash, which is what I started with, just get yourself one light with one modifier and one light stand. Buy a sturdy light stand, something that's got a bit of weight to it. You can usually tell by the price. I think if you get something that's going to be like $50, $60, something like that, maybe 70, that's going to be a strong light stand. You can do with just a speed light. That's more than enough. I'll put a couple of pictures on, and I've put this stuff up before, but these pictures were shot with a speed light, which is an SB80DX. I'll show it to you because it's right here. Right, here it is. This is my speed light that I started my photography career on, and I still use it now. It's an SB80DX from Nikon. Don't have to buy this one. Light is light. Just buy yourself a cheap speed light. This was cheap at the time. I wanted something that I could get started on, and it's done me well ever since. And I just haven't stopped using it because, it works. So why would I need anything different? And so those pictures that I've just shown you on that were taken on speedlight were shot on this exact speedlight. Like I said, I'm still using the thing. You only need something basic like this, and then a basic set of triggers in order to trigger it. You do not need, right, all of the wireless TTL and I can control the flash power from the back of the camera. You don't need any of that. I don't do stuff like that. I just go up to the flash, get it to the power level I want, and then I shoot. It's not like you're changing your flash power constantly every 2 or 3 shots. It's just ridiculous. Like if you're on a wedding event shooter, having control of your flash from the back of your camera, that's useful, but it's still not needed, and not something that I spent much time with either doing weddings. But for doing portraits, just being able to turn the power up and down, simple press of the button, that's all you need, because you'll know after you've done it for a while, you'll be spending a lot of time at sort of quarter power, something like that, and you just sort of set it and you kind of know the range that you want to be at, and it's not like you're having to make these constant adjustments all the time. Everything's always in the same range roughly. Think about it. If you're doing a studio shoot with someone, the flash is going to be a certain distance from your subject, and that's basically always going to be the same power level, right? The idea I think people have in their minds is that they're constantly changing their power. Well, I need to go up, now it needs to go down, and now it needs to go here. Okay, so as you move around and you move the subject a different distance, or you're trying to create a different look, you might need to change that. But at the same time, you're still going to get used to what those settings are. So you'll know after a while, okay, I need to go down to like 30-second power, and then you'll switch it to that. So get yourself a really basic flash like this. Get a set of simple triggers that will work with your flash. Don't worry about all the TTL stuff. You just need it to fire the thing. in manual mode, and that's it. Then from modifier, I would suggest that you get a softbox rather than an umbrella. The problem with umbrellas, I mean, umbrellas are fine, don't get me wrong, but umbrellas are kind of like spill the light everywhere type things. And softboxes are more along the lines of, okay, we're going to sort of beam light in this direction, and it's more controllable, so you'll have more control over your light. So something that's like a 3 foot by 2 foot softbox or an octabox that's that size, you don't have to get a huge one, especially when you're starting. The softbox I started with and still use a lot today is a 3 foot by 2 foot Bowens softbox. Bowens is the mount that goes on the back, how it connects. And then you just need a connecting bracket to get the light stand to connect to the softbox and the flash unit. So you're connecting the light stand to the light and to the softbox. They all need to go together. And one of those looks like this. You can see me through that, right? So the light stand connects into the bottom here and you tighten it up. You need to make sure the mount on your softbox matches the mount on this. And I go for Bowens always because there's a lot of Bowens mount stuff around. So then what will happen is that will sit on the light stand with the softbox there, and then the speed light just goes into the back like that, and then you tighten it down, and then that's how that fires. You put like the trigger on the back here, and that gives you your ability to have like off-camera flash essentially. And then so you have one camera with one lens, and you have this simple system. And then what you do is you forget about camera gear for a really long time until you run into a roadblock where you have a problem which you can't solve unless you buy something new. And I became good at lighting. I got used to moving the softbox around, the different lighting ratio, like how far away the light is and so on. And I just worked with this one light setup for a really, really long time. And I started winning awards with it and doing all sorts of stuff, like getting interesting little projects and stuff to shoot. And I think it really comes off the back of just focusing on the doing of photography. So I'm going to give you a good piece of advice here, which sounds absolutely obvious, and it is obvious, but people don't do it. If you want to be a photographer and you want to be a good photographer, you need to get to know the gear that you've got and become a good photographer with it. You need to learn the photography gear that you have so you master that gear and you understand what it does and how it works, and then become a good photographer with that gear. You see, someone who has one light with one softbox and one camera with one lens, and then they practice and practice and practice, and they try to be as creative as possible with that setup, will destroy someone who spends the same amount of time and effort with more gear and more lighting equipment, because they're practicing a very focused thing. It's like saying you want to get good at sprinting 100 meters, and one person is practicing sprinting 100 meters and somebody else is doing a bit of cycling, bit of swimming, bit of this, bit of that. So if the actual goal is to sprint 100 meters, the person doing the 100 meter sprints will be better. The other person might become a better all-rounder, but they won't stand out because they're doing too many things. You want to just focus on something for a good number of years. It doesn't mean you can't branch out and do other things later, but become good at something. Become actually good at something. And that takes effort, discipline, and not doing this constant search for the sort of the hidden secret, the bit of gear that's going to change everything, the one bit of technique or inspiration that's going to make all the difference. It's actually just a hard graft of just progressing. And it's fun. Enjoy the process, because what you should be looking forward to is thinking about the ideas that you're putting together for your shoots. Like, who you're going to work with, what's the idea for the shoot, how do you want to make your pictures look? Do you want to do high key or low key? Do you want to have like bright and more airy images? And if you do, actually, an umbrella might suit you better. But I think a lot of people that follow me will want to have more of that low key look. Softbox is going to suit you better for that. So you want something like that. But you don't need more than that then. Just get on with it. You don't need light meters or any of this stuff. You've got a camera with a screen on the back of it. Look at it. That's what you've got. If it's not what you want, adjust it until you get what you want. Keep it simple. Learn to do some basic editing so you can change the way your pictures look. I have Lightroom editing courses for my outdoor and indoor portrait work. If you want to check it out, links are in the description down below. They will take you up to a more advanced level of editing. You'll be able to get more of these low-key, dramatic and sort of moody looks. Photographers kind of do this thing where they take pictures and they put them out, And then they said, people will find me now. Everyone recognized my genius. And it doesn't really work like that, because what you're doing is you're standing in a field with 500,000 other photographers doing exactly the same thing and hoping that you're going to stand out. So realistically, the people that talk the loudest, that make the most noise, I'm talking sort of metaphorically, the people that make the most noise about what they're doing stand out more. It's kind of obvious, right? So in that analogy, we've got these 500,000 photographers in the field. If one person starts jumping up and down saying, hey, over here, look at me, look at me, look at my work, there's a chance that person's going to have more work seen. So, you get the idea. Like, the more noise you can make around yourself, around your work, the more people are going to pay attention to what you're doing. You need to create something around yourself. And the way you do that is more than just setting out your stall. You can't just put stuff on the stall and sit on the chair. You have to make a little bit of a noise. And that means writing stuff about your work. That's one way you can do it. So you can write things, give more of a description, talk about those things more. You might make a video. You can even just record some audio over your work. Like, if you want to make some reels or something, or get your work out there, but try and make some noise and try and get some attention, rather than just sort of putting this stuff out there and then hoping that people are going to randomly find you. That doesn't always work that well. But there is this key that you can use to getting noticed more, and it's the quantity game. And the quantity game is simply to say that the person who is making the most stuff gets noticed more. So if you can produce more work and put more work out, that in itself has a quality to it, as long as the work's good, right? So the kind of slider that people have in their mind of, hey, do we do like loads of rubbish work or lots or just a small amount of really good work? Well, what would be really good is if you can put out loads of good work. That's not always so easy to do, but again, if you're going through this thing of like, you're just doing one thing well, it becomes easy to churn this stuff out. And that's what I did in my career. I focused early on weddings and portraits. So weddings was to get, some money that was kind of more instant. But in terms of what I was doing artistically, it was just studio portraits, mostly with one light and one camera, one lens. And I was just smashing out shoots like crazy and doing as many as I could. And it got me noticed. It just did. It just gets you noticed. And I think that you have to sort of have faith in the ability of that. If you just put out work, at the time it was all on Facebook. I was like sticking everything on Facebook, but people were meeting, like people were coming from other countries to shoot. I mean, it was mad really when you think about it, but people would come from overseas and they'd be like, right, I'm in the UK, Martin, can you do a shoot with me? I'm like, yeah, okay. So people were noticing, and like they pay attention to stuff like this, and you can do this too. You can get set up like that. Pick a platform like Facebook's probably still quite good for things like that as well. But get your work out there and get people to notice what you're doing and become a photographer. If you want to be a portrait photographer, you need to be a portrait photographer. I know that sort of sounds like an oversimplification, right? But realistically, if you think about it, if you start putting shoots together and getting things done, things will happen. But the one mistake I see people making all the time when they do this stuff is they kind of expect that they're going to do 2 or 3 shoots and then there's going to be this flood of interest and that everyone's going to come to them and recognize their genius and stuff like that. And you just need to understand that when you're starting out, you'll probably think that you're better than you are. And you'll probably look at photographers that are a bit better than you and you feel like you're just one car length behind them, when actually you're sort of still over the horizon, because the gap between the stages and levels of photography is months, if not years. And I think that it's easy to feel like when someone is actually technically only maybe a little bit better than you, it's easy to underestimate how long that gap takes to close. It does take a really long time and you just have to put this work into it. But you can do it and you don't know what's going to happen. I think the biggest thing for me in a portrait photography career has just been the kind of jobs and the kind of opportunities that I've had, which I can't predict. There's so much that happens that you just cannot foresee. I hope that's useful for you guys, and I will see you again in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.